Welcome to the HFY Tales channel. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the story. Enjoy and take care. John West sat quietly in the corner of the Celestial Horizons mess hall, swirling the cold remnants of his drink. The room was a cacophony of laughter, conversations, and the occasional clatter of metal plates as the alien crew of the Galactic Coalition starship went about their meal. Around him sat representatives of some of the most formidable species in the galaxy, each one stronger, faster, and more advanced than him in every conceivable way. John adjusted the sleeves of his standard-issue uniform, feeling the fabric stretch against his lean frame. Compared to the others, his build was laughably small. His human bones, once a source of pride back on Earth, felt brittle and insignificant in the presence of towering alien figures with armored scales, multi-limbed appendages, and eyes that glowed with enhanced vision. It wasn't just their size that set them apart. The room was filled with warriors, beings who had seen countless battles across star systems, who had wielded weapons John could barely comprehend. Every one of them seemed to carry the weight of their species' superiority, a fact that they reminded him of at every turn. Across the hall, a loud burst of laughter erupted, drawing John's attention to the center table. There, seated among his fellow Dargathans, was Talarak, a towering brute of a warrior, his scaled skin glinting under the dim lights. His race, the Dargathans, were known for their brute strength and combat prowess. John had heard stories of them tearing through entire armies with nothing but their bare hands. Talarak was no exception. His muscular frame and piercing yellow eyes made him one of the most feared members of the crew. Talarak's laughter echoed through the hall, and John instinctively knew he was the target. "Look at him," Talarak bellowed, pointing a thick, clawed finger directly at John. His voice was a deep rumble, loud enough to make the plates on the tables vibrate. "A human! What a waste of a good coalition seat. How do they expect us to win wars with creatures like that?" The room erupted into a chorus of laughter. Even some of the crew members who usually ignored John snickered, their gazes flickering toward him in amusement. He could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him, the condescension thick in the air. John set his cup down and clenched his fists beneath the table. The mockery had become a daily occurrence ever since he'd joined the crew. It didn't matter that he had scored high in every simulator, that he had passed every tactical training course. To them, he was still just a human, weak, fragile, and inferior. "They say humans are adaptable," Talarak continued, his grin widening. "But adaptable to what? Paperwork? Filing reports? I doubt he could even lift a plasma rifle without dropping it." More laughter. John's jaw tightened as he stared down at the table, willing himself to stay calm. Rising to the bait would only confirm their belief that he was weak. But the anger bubbling inside him was hard to contain. "They don't understand us," John muttered under his breath. "They never will." He thought back to Earth, the planet that had sent him into space as part of the Galactic Coalition's experimental human integration program. Humanity had been the last species to join the coalition, and even then it had been more out of pity than necessity. They were considered small and insignificant compared to the mighty species that had already conquered the stars. But humanity had one thing going for them: resilience. That was something these aliens would never understand. Before Talarak could hurl another insult, the lights in the mess hall dimmed and an alert sounded through the ship. Instantly, the mood shifted. Laughter faded into silence, and the crew straightened in their seats as the holographic image of Captain Darren appeared above the central control panel. Darren, a tall and slender creature with blue-tinted skin and sharp crystalline eyes, commanded respect effortlessly. His gaze swept over the room, his voice cutting through the tension with cold efficiency. "Attention, crew. We have intercepted a distress signal from an uncharted region in Sector 47 Zeta," Darren said, his voice steady and composed. "Preliminary scans suggest the signal is coming from a derelict ship of unknown origin. We are en route to investigate. All exploration teams report to the armory and prepare for boarding." The room buzzed with excitement. An uncharted sector, unknown origin. The possibility of advanced alien technology or lost artifacts was enough to make even the most jaded warriors eager for action. John stood up quickly, his heart racing. This was it. This was his chance. If he could get on that exploration team, he could finally prove himself. Prove that humans were more than just a galactic afterthought. Talarak, of course, was the first to rise, his hulking frame towering over the others as he stretched his arms. "Let's see what treasure awaits us," Talarak said with a smirk. "Maybe we'll find something a human can carry this time." John's teeth ground together as he headed toward the armory. He refused to let the Dargathan's words get to him. He had trained for this. He had earned his place on this ship, no matter what anyone said. As he suited up in his exploration gear, John couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. Uncharted space was dangerous, sure, but it was also full of mystery, and possibly the opportunity he needed to finally prove his worth. The celestial horizon drifted through the vast expanse of Sector 47 Zeta, a region of space so remote and desolate that it had long been forgotten by most star charts. The ship's powerful thrusters hummed as it navigated through the asteroid-filled debris field that littered the sector, remnants of ancient battles fought long before any of the crew had been born. John sat in the cramped shuttle bay with the rest of the exploration team, his mind racing as they prepared for the boarding operation. He adjusted the straps on his harness, double-checked the settings on his wrist-mounted datapad, and tried to ignore the knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. The shuttle bay was filled with the soft beeps and hums of equipment coming online, the air thick with the scent of metal and oil. Around him, the other members of the team, aliens with far more experience than he, chatted amongst themselves, their excitement palpable. Talarak was there, of course, grinning like a predator as he examined his plasma rifle. The Dargathan never missed an opportunity to boast about his battle prowess, and today was no exception. "Ready to see some real action, human?" Talarak asked, his voice dripping with condescension. He stood directly in front of John, the sharp ridges of his reptilian face casting shadows in the dim light. John didn't answer, keeping his gaze fixed on his equipment. He knew better than to engage with Talarak now. Let the Dargathan have his fun. Soon enough, they'd be on the derelict ship, and John would have his own chance to prove himself. The shuttle jerked slightly as it detached from the celestial horizon, the artificial gravity flickering momentarily before stabilizing. John felt the familiar weightlessness in his limbs as the shuttle accelerated toward the derelict ship ahead. Outside the viewport, the dark expanse of space stretched endlessly, the distant stars twinkling like far-off beacons. In the distance, the derelict ship loomed, a massive, jagged silhouette against the backdrop of space. Its size was staggering, far larger than any vessel John had ever seen before. The hull was riddled with scars, evidence of battles long past. Some sections appeared to be completely destroyed, with twisted metal and gaping holes where parts of the ship had been torn apart. "This thing must be centuries old," one of the alien crew members murmured over the comms. "No signs of life, but I'm reading faint power signatures." "Faint power signatures?" John repeated, narrowing his eyes at the data displayed on his wristpad. "After all this time?" "Could be residual energy from old systems," the crew member replied, "or something more." John felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the ship didn't feel right. It was too quiet, too still. It had the unmistakable aura of a tomb, a place where time had stopped, but secrets still lingered. The shuttle docked with the derelict ship's airlock, the clank of metal on metal reverberating through the cabin. The team quickly prepared for disembarkation, their helmets sealing with soft hisses as they activated their suits' life support systems. As the airlock door slid open with a low groan, John's heart raced. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. He followed the others into the derelict ship, stepping through the threshold and into the unknown. The moment John stepped into the derelict ship, a profound sense of isolation washed over him. The corridor ahead was dimly lit, the walls coated with layers of dust and grime that had built up over what must have been centuries. The lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that danced along the floor and ceiling. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, though their suits maintained a breathable atmosphere. John could hear the faint sound of his own breathing inside his helmet, a slow rhythm that seemed unnaturally loud against the utter silence of the ancient vessel. "Stay alert," Talarak growled over the comms, his tone all business now. Whatever amusement he had found in mocking John earlier had disappeared the moment they set foot on the derelict ship. John moved carefully behind Talarak, his hand resting on his holstered plasma pistol. His eyes scanned the corridor, taking in every detail. The walls were etched with strange symbols, alien glyphs that John had never seen before. They glowed faintly, as though they still retained some remnant of energy. "What do you make of these?" one of the other crew members asked, running a scanner over the symbols. The scanner emitted a series of beeps, but the readouts were inconclusive. "Unknown language," the crew member said, shaking his head. "Nothing in the Coalition's database." "Figures," Talarak muttered. "Probably some long-dead race no one remembers." John frowned, feeling a strange sense of familiarity as he looked at the glyphs. He couldn't explain it, but something about them tugged at the edges of his mind, as though he'd seen them before, though that was impossible. The symbols seemed to pulse with a faint energy, almost like they were alive, watching. The team moved deeper into the ship, passing through corridors that twisted and turned like a labyrinth. Each passage they walked through felt more desolate than the last. There were no signs of life, no bodies, no personal effects, nothing to indicate who had once crewed the ship. It was as if they had simply vanished, leaving behind only the cold, empty shell of their vessel. "There's something off about this place," John said quietly over the comms. "No kidding, human," Talarak replied, his voice tight with unease. "This ship shouldn't be this intact after so many centuries. Something's keeping it alive." John had to agree. The ship was old, but the fact that some systems were still running, the faint lights, the occasional flicker of power, was unnerving. It was as if the ship itself was clinging to life, refusing to die. They came to a junction where 3 corridors branched off in different directions. The lead crew member checked his wrist pad, trying to determine the best route. "Splitting up would be stupid, right?" someone joked, though the nervousness in their voice was apparent. "Damn right it would be," Talarak said. "We stay together." John nodded, grateful for that decision. He wasn't about to go wandering off alone in this floating graveyard. "Let's try the left corridor," Talarak said, leading the way. The further they went, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. There was something about the silence, an unnatural quiet that made every sound they made feel intrusive, like they were disturbing something that should have been left alone. After what felt like hours of walking, they came to a large, sealed door at the end of a long corridor. The door was different from the others they had passed. It was larger, more imposing, with intricate patterns of glyphs etched into its surface. Unlike the rest of the ship, this door seemed pristine, untouched by the decay that had claimed the rest of the vessel. "Well, this looks promising," Talarak said, stepping forward to examine the door. "Let's see what's behind door number 1. He raised his plasma cutter and began slicing through the metal, sparks flying as the tool did its work. The door groaned as it gave way, sliding open with a heavy metallic hiss. Beyond the door was a large, circular chamber, its walls lined with more of the glowing glyphs. At the center of the room stood a raised platform, and atop that platform was an object covered by a tattered, translucent cloth. The moment John stepped into the room, a strange sensation washed over him. It was a pull, an almost magnetic force drawing him toward the platform. His breath hitched as he took a step closer, his gaze fixed on the object beneath the cloth. "What is that?" one of the crew members asked, their voice filled with awe. "Only one way to find out," Talarak said, stepping toward the platform. But before he could get too close, John found himself moving forward, his feet carrying him almost against his will. The closer he got to the platform, the stronger the pull became. His mind raced, trying to understand what was happening, but there were no answers, only the overwhelming compulsion to reach the object. "John!" one of the crew members called out, confused by his sudden movement. He ignored them. His eyes were locked on the cloth, on whatever lay beneath it. Without a word, he reached out and pulled the cloth away. Beneath it lay an ancient suit of armor. The armor was unlike anything John had ever seen. Its surface was smooth, black as the void, with intricate patterns of glowing glyphs running along its length. It seemed almost alive, as though it was waiting for someone to claim it. "Whoa," Talarak muttered, his usual bravado gone. "What the hell is that?" John couldn't answer. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing as he stared at the armor. The pull he had felt was stronger now, almost unbearable. It was as if the armor was calling to him, demanding that he put it on. And before he could stop himself, he did. The moment his fingers touched the cool surface of the armor, it sprang to life. The glyphs flared brightly, and the armor began to shift, its pieces moving and aligning themselves. It lifted off the platform and began to wrap around John's body, piece by piece. He felt a strange warmth as the armor melded with him, as though it was becoming a part of him. "John, what the hell are you doing?" Talarak shouted, his voice filled with alarm. But John couldn't stop. The armor moved on its own, locking into place with a series of soft hisses. Within moments, it had fully encased him, covering him from head to toe in its sleek, black surface. The glyphs glowed faintly, and John could feel a surge of energy coursing through him, energy unlike anything he had ever experienced before. His vision sharpened, his senses heightened. He felt stronger, faster, more alive than he ever had. It was as if the armor had unlocked something within him, something powerful and ancient. But it wasn't just power, he felt. It was knowledge. Memories flooded his mind, memories that weren't his own. He saw flashes of battles, of worlds torn apart by war, of enemies that defied description. And through it all, there was one constant, the armor. The armor had been there, worn by warriors long gone, wielded by beings who had fought to protect the galaxy from a force unlike any other, the force that now stirred beneath the ship. John stood frozen, encased in the ancient armor that had now become part of him. His mind was a whirlwind of memories, fragments of battles and warriors long forgotten, flashes of distant stars and dying worlds. The glyphs on the armor pulsed faintly, as if alive, and with every pulse, he felt the energy of the suit growing stronger. But beneath the rush of power, something darker stirred. John could feel it, a presence, ancient and malevolent, waking from a long slumber. The ship around them seemed to tremble, its walls groaning under some unseen force. "John, get that thing off you," Talarak barked, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and anger. He took a step forward, his plasma rifle raised, but John didn't move. He couldn't. The armor wasn't just on him, it was a part of him now, bonded to his very essence. "I can't," John said, his voice shaking. It's alive." The room grew colder, and suddenly the lights in the chamber flickered. The glyphs on the walls brightened for a moment, casting the entire room in an eerie glow before dimming again. The strange symbols seemed to pulse in time with the armor's energy, as though they were communicating with it. "What the hell is going on?" one of the other crew members muttered, their eyes wide with panic. John didn't have an answer, but he knew something was wrong. Very wrong. Then, the ship shuddered violently, throwing the entire team off their feet. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the corridors, vibrating through the metal walls like a living thing. It wasn't just the sound of a ship falling apart, it was something else, something alive. "We need to get out of here," one of the crew members shouted, scrambling to his feet. Talarak looked around, his jaw clenched. "What the hell did you do, human?" Before John could respond, a cold, suffocating presence washed over the room. It was as if the air itself had turned thick and heavy, pressing down on them. A deep, resonant voice whispered in the back of John's mind, a voice that seemed to come from the very core of the ship. "Release me." John staggered back, clutching his head. The voice was too strong, too overwhelming. It wasn't just a sound, it was a force, an entity that had been trapped here for eons, waiting for the moment when it could finally be free. "The Void Walker," John whispered, the name slipping from his lips unbidden. Talarak turned to him, eyes wide. "What did you say?" "The armor. It's showing me things," John gasped, struggling to keep his balance as the ship trembled again. "This ship, it's not just a wreck, it's a prison. They trapped it here. The Void Walker." "The Void Walker? "What the hell are you talking about?" Talarak snapped, but there was fear in his voice now. John shook his head, trying to make sense of the flood of memories that weren't his own. He saw visions of a great war, an ancient battle fought across the stars. The Aegis, the race that had created the armor, had fought against the Voidwalker, a being of pure destruction, capable of consuming entire worlds. They had managed to imprison it here, in this ship. And now it was waking up. The glyphs on the walls flared brighter, casting the chamber in a harsh, unnatural light. The ground beneath them cracked, and from the depths of the ship came a low, guttural growl, a sound that sent shivers down John's spine. "We've got to go," one of the crew members shouted, panicked now. Talarak nodded, his usual bravado shattered by the sheer terror of the moment. "Fall back to the shuttle, now." John hesitated, his body torn between fleeing and confronting the growing threat. The armor hummed with energy, urging him to fight, but he didn't know how. He wasn't a warrior like the ones who had worn the suit before. He was just John, a human, mocked by his peers, out of place in a galaxy filled with stronger, faster beings. But the armor wouldn't let him run. He could feel it compelling him to stand his ground, to face whatever horror was about to emerge. As the others sprinted toward the exit, John remained where he was, his eyes locked on the far end of the chamber. The floor beneath him cracked open with a deafening roar, and from the depths of the ship rose the Voidwalker. The Voidwalker was unlike anything John had ever imagined. Its form was amorphous, shifting and writhing like liquid shadow. Dark tendrils of energy snaked through the air, lashing out at the walls, sending sparks of light scattering across the chamber. Its very presence seemed to warp the space around it, bending the light, twisting the air. It was a being of pure destruction, and its hunger was palpable. John could feel it, a deep, insatiable need to consume, to destroy everything in its path. "Release me," the voice whispered again, this time louder, more insistent. John stood his ground, his heart pounding in his chest. The others were gone now, fleeing toward the shuttle in a desperate attempt to escape. But he couldn't leave. The armor pulsed with energy, and the memories of the Aegis warriors filled his mind once more. They had fought this creature before, and they had won, barely. But now it was his turn to face it, and he was alone. The Voidwalker lunged toward him, its tendrils of shadow reaching out with terrifying speed. John's body reacted on instinct, the armor moving before his mind could catch up. He dodged to the side, faster than he had ever moved before, and the Voidwalker's tendrils slammed into the ground where he had just been standing, cracking the metal floor. The armor's systems flared to life, and John felt a surge of power rush through him. His vision sharpened, his reflexes heightened. He wasn't just wearing the armor, he was becoming it. The memories of the Aegis flowed through him, guiding his movements, showing him how to fight. The Voidwalker struck again, its tendrils slicing through the air with deadly precision. But John was faster. He dodged, rolled, and countered with a blast of energy from the armor's gauntlet. The blast hit the Voidwalker, sending a shockwave of light through its shadowy form. The creature howled, recoiling from the attack, but it wasn't enough to stop it. "You're going to have to do better than that," John muttered to himself, his confidence growing. The Voidwalker roared, its form shifting and expanding, filling the chamber with darkness. Its tendrils lashed out in every direction, smashing into walls, ripping through the floor. The ship groaned under the strain, metal creaking and buckling as the Voidwalker's power tore it apart. John dodged again, barely avoiding a tendril that nearly impaled him. The armor's energy flared, and John felt a strange, overwhelming sense of connection to the ship. The glyphs on the walls pulsed in time with the armor's energy, as though they were linked. He could feel the ancient systems of the ship stirring, responding to the armor's presence. There was only one way to stop the Voidwalker. John had to use the armor's full power. The memories of the Aegis warriors surged through John's mind, clearer now than ever before. He saw them standing in this very chamber, wearing the same armor, facing the same creature. They had fought with everything they had, but in the end, they had been forced to make a terrible choice. They had used the armor's core, the ancient power source that had allowed them to imprison the Voidwalker in the first place. But the cost had been great. The Aegis had sacrificed themselves, binding their energy to the ship, creating a prison that would hold the Voidwalker for eternity. John knew what he had to do. The armor pulsed with energy, and John could feel the core activating deep within the suit. It was a power beyond anything he had ever felt, vast, ancient, and dangerous. If he activated it, he would destroy the Voidwalker, but it would also mean the end of the armor, and possibly his own life. But there was no other choice. With a deep breath, John closed his eyes and focused. The armor responded instantly, its systems aligning, preparing for the final strike. The glyphs on the walls flared brighter, casting the entire chamber in a blinding light. The Voidwalker lunged toward him, its form twisted with rage and desperation. But John stood his ground. In one final, desperate act, John unleashed the full power of the armor. The energy erupted from the suit, a brilliant, blinding wave of light that surged through the chamber. The Voidwalker let out a deafening howl as the light consumed it, tearing its form apart, scattering its essence into the void. The ship shook violently, metal groaning and cracking as the ancient systems overloaded. The glyphs on the walls shattered, their light fading as the ship began to collapse. John fell to his knees, the armor's energy draining away. He could feel it breaking apart, the pieces crumbling, turning to dust. The suit that had given him strength, that had made him more than just a human, was gone. But the Voidwalker was defeated. When John awoke, he was lying on the cold floor of the derelict ship, the dim emergency lights flickering above him. The armor was gone, reduced to nothing but fragments scattered around him. He felt weak, drained, but alive. Talarak and the rest of the team stood over him, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. You did it," Talarak said quietly, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "You stopped it." John nodded weakly, struggling to sit up. His body ached, and his mind was still reeling from the intensity of the battle. But he had done it. He had proven that humanity wasn't weak, wasn't inferior. He had saved them all. As the team helped him to his feet, John couldn't help but glance at the shattered remains of the armor. It had been a gift, a burden, and now a memory. But in the end, he had been strong enough. And as they left the ship, John knew that the galaxy would never forget what he had done.